Sarah Montgomery ripped her wedding ring off her finger and placed it on the nightstand. 3 carats. 10 years of lies. She didn't cry. She had finished crying 2 years ago, the first night she smelled another woman's perfume on her husband's collar. Tonight, Garrett was in a hotel room with his mistress, believing his wife was home baking cookies. He had no idea that by sunrise, he would lose everything: his job, his money, his house, and the woman he had so carelessly thrown away. If you want to see how one quiet wife brought down a cheating husband, subscribe to our channel, watch until the end, and comment what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The night everything changed. The smell of Chanel No. 5 still clung to Garrett Bradford's collar when he slid his key into the lock. 6:14 in the morning. The sky was gray and heavy with rain. He had rehearsed his lies during the entire drive from Manhattan. The turbulence over Ohio, the difficult client, the dead phone battery. He had told these lies so many times they felt like truth. He pushed the door open. "Sarah, I'm home." Silence answered him. Not the comfortable silence of a sleeping house, but something hollow, something wrong. Garrett dropped his overnight bag in the foyer. His Italian leather shoes echoed on the hardwood floors as he walked toward the kitchen. No coffee brewing. No bacon sizzling. No Sarah standing at the stove with that patient smile he had grown to despise. "Sarah?" The kitchen was spotless, cold. The granite countertops gleamed under the pendant lights, but they gleamed like a showroom, untouched, unlived in. On the marble island, where his breakfast usually waited, there was only a thick manila envelope with a red legal stamp. Garrett stared at it. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for it, then stopped. Something made him look around first. The living room, the painting above the fireplace, the oil painting of the Italian coast that Sarah's grandmother had left her, was gone. Just a faint outline on the wall where it had hung for 10 years. His heart began to pound. He took the stairs 2 at a time. "Sarah!" The master bedroom door was open. The bed was made with military precision. He walked to the closet, already knowing what he would find. His side was untouched. Suits, shirts, shoes, everything exactly where he had left them. Sarah's side was empty. Not just packed for a trip empty, erased. The hangers were gone. The shoe rack was bare. Even the velvet jewelry boxes had vanished. Garrett Bradford stood in the closet of his $4 million Greenwich mansion, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt afraid. He walked back to the bedroom. On Sarah's nightstand sat 2 things: her wedding ring, the 3-carat diamond he had bought her after missing her birthday 3 years ago, and the manila envelope. He picked up the ring first. It felt light, meaningless. He tore open the envelope. The first page wasn't a letter. It wasn't a tear-stained note begging him to come back. It was a legal document. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Sarah Marie Montgomery. Respondent, Garrett Thomas Bradford. Garrett laughed, a dry, incredulous sound that bounced off the empty walls. "You have got to be kidding me." He flipped the page. Photos. High-resolution, time-stamped, professionally shot photographs. Him and Madison at dinner 3 weeks ago. Him and Madison entering the St. Regis last night. Him and Madison kissing in Central Park. These weren't taken by a jealous friend with an iPhone. These were surveillance photos. Professional. Expensive. Garrett's legs gave out. He sat on the edge of the bed, papers scattering around him. "How?" he whispered. "Where did she get the money for this?" Sarah had no income. He gave her a monthly allowance. Generous, sure, but tracked. Every credit card purchase sent a notification to his phone. He controlled the finances. He was the CEO. He knew where every penny went. He flipped further into the stack. A letter. Thick cream paper. The letterhead read, Reynolds, Stone and Associates. Garrett's blood ran cold. Reynolds. Stone wasn't just a law firm. It was the law firm for high-asset divorces in New York. They charged $1,000 an hour just to answer the phone. They had destroyed senators, hedge fund managers, Fortune 500 executives. How could Sarah afford them? He began to read. Dear Mr. Bradford, please be advised that I represent your wife, Mrs. Sarah Montgomery Bradford, in the matter of your divorce. By the time you read this, Mrs. Bradford will have vacated the marital residence. As you are aware, the deed to this property is held in the name of the Bradford Family Trust. However, we would like to draw your attention to Clause 14, Section B of the prenuptial agreement you signed 11 years ago. Garrett frowned. The prenup. He remembered it clearly. He had insisted on it. He was the rising star at the consulting firm. She was just a hospital librarian, the quiet daughter of a history professor. He had made her sign it without even reading it, or so he thought. The infidelity clause, inserted at the request of the bride's family attorney, states that in the event of proven adultery by the primary earner, all assets acquired during the marriage, including the marital home, shall revert immediately to the injured party. Furthermore, we wish to inform you that the vesting period for your shares in Bradford Sterling Medical Consulting has been triggered. Garrett stopped reading. His shares. His company. He grabbed his phone and dialed his business partner, James Sterling. James, listen. Sarah has gone crazy. She filed for divorce. She hired some shark lawyer. Garrett. James's voice was ice. It wasn't the voice of his college roommate and best friend. It was the voice of a man speaking to a stranger. James, what's wrong? Garrett, you need to check your email. The board just finished an emergency meeting. What meeting? It's 7 in the morning. Sarah was there, or rather, her lawyer was. He dialed in at 5 a.m. Garrett's throat tightened. What does Sarah have to do with the board? She's a librarian. There was a long pause. You really didn't know, did you? James said quietly. You really never looked into her family. Her father was a history professor. Her mother died when she was young. What's there to know? Her mother's maiden name, Garrett. Did you ever ask about her mother's maiden name? No. Why would I? It was Whitmore. The name hit Garrett like a freight train. Whitmore. As in Catherine Whitmore. As in the Whitmore family that owned the largest chain of private hospitals on the East Coast. As in the Whitmore Foundation that funded half the medical research in the country. That's not possible, Garrett stammered. She lives like a librarian. She drives a Honda. She wanted to be loved for herself, Garrett. That's what she told me when we started the company. Why do you think we got that angel investment 10 years ago? The anonymous investor from the Cayman Islands that launched everything. Garrett couldn't breathe. That was Sarah. She owns 51% of the voting shares. She's been the silent majority shareholder this entire time. And this morning, she wasn't silent. What did she do? She fired you, Garrett, effective immediately. Security has your photo at the front desk. Don't come in. The phone slipped from Garrett's fingers and clattered to the floor. He stared at the wall where the painting used to hang. For 10 years, he had cheated on his wife. He had lied to her face. He had called her boring, simple, naive. He had told his mistress that Sarah was the anchor, something to drag along while he steered the ship. But Sarah hadn't been the anchor. She had been the ship, the harbor, the entire ocean. And he had just been a passenger who didn't bother to read the manifest. Garrett sat on the bedroom floor for what felt like hours. The divorce papers were scattered around him like fallen leaves. His mind raced through every moment of the past 10 years, searching for signs he had missed. The prenup. He had laughed when Sarah's family attorney had insisted on the infidelity clause. "What, you think I'm going to cheat?" he had joked. "I'm marrying the love of my life." Sarah had looked at him with those quiet green eyes and said nothing. He should have known then. He should have noticed how she never asked where the startup money came from, how she never questioned the anonymous investor, how she attended every board meeting as a guest, but always seemed to know exactly what was happening. But Garrett Bradford had been too busy being Garrett Bradford. He pulled himself up and walked to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. He looked older than 42. Gray was creeping into his temples. The lines around his eyes had deepened. "Okay," he said to the mirror. "Okay. Think." Sarah had the house. Sarah had the company shares. But he still had his personal accounts, his savings, his stock portfolio. He had been smart about money. He had kept some assets separate, just in case. He grabbed his phone and opened his banking app. Account suspended. Please contact customer service. He tried the brokerage account. Access denied. This account has been frozen, pending legal review. He tried his American Express Black Card. Card declined. Garrett's hands shook as he dialed the concierge number on the back of the card. "Mr. Bradford," the representative said after a long pause, "I'm sorry, but your account has been suspended per a court order received this morning. All credit lines under your name have been frozen pending the divorce litigation and—" she hesitated. "And the pending criminal investigation." "Criminal investigation? What criminal investigation?" "I'm not authorized to discuss the details, sir. You should contact your attorney." She hung up. Garrett threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. Criminal investigation? His mind raced. What had he done that was criminal? The affairs weren't illegal. Morally wrong, sure, but not criminal. Then he remembered. The expense reports. The client dinners that were actually romantic getaways with Madison. The vendor gifts that were actually jewelry for his mistress. The apartment in the city that he had buried under talent retention housing. He had been skimming from the company for 2 years. Small amounts, he had told himself. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. He was the CEO. Who was going to audit him? Sarah. Sarah was going to audit him. She had probably known for months, maybe longer. She had been watching him steal from her company while he bragged about being a self-made man. Garrett ran to the wall safe in the closet. The painting that usually hid it was gone, of course, but the safe was still there. He spun the dial. 42, 10, 33, and it clicked open. Empty. Inside, where he kept emergency cash and his passport, there was only a post-it note in Sarah's handwriting. Your passport is with your lawyer. S. She had taken his passport. He was trapped. No money, no credit, no way out of the country. Garrett Bradford, the man who had controlled everything, controlled nothing. He needed Madison. Madison didn't know yet. Madison thought he was still the powerful CEO. Madison had an apartment in the city, small, but a place to hide. And he had bought her plenty of jewelry over the years. If things got desperate, they could pawn the diamond necklace. That was worth at least 20 grand. He grabbed his car keys and ran to the garage. The black Porsche Panamera sat there, sleek and silent. He jumped in and pressed the start button. Click, click, click. The dashboard lit up with a message. Remote immobilization active. Contact dealer. No, 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 no. The car was leased through the company, through Bradford Sterling Medical Consulting, through Sarah. She had bricked his car remotely. Garrett slammed his fists against the steering wheel until his hands ached. He was stranded in his own driveway, in his own life, with nothing but the clothes on his back. He walked back into the house, Sarah's house now, and searched for anything of value. The silverware, the art, the electronics, gone. All of it. Sarah hadn't just left. She had erased herself and taken everything that mattered. In the kitchen drawer, he found $43 in cash and a charged burner phone he had hidden for emergencies. He pocketed both. Then he started walking. The train station was 3 miles away. Garrett Bradford, in his $3,000 Italian suit and his $400 leather shoes, walked along the side of the road like a vagrant. Cars passed him, people he might have waved to at the country club. They didn't recognize him, or if they did, they pretended not to. By the time he reached the station, his feet were blistered and his suit was soaked with sweat. He bought a one-way ticket to Manhattan with his remaining cash and collapsed into a seat. The train pulled away from Greenwich, and Garrett watched the manicured lawns and iron gates disappear. He dialed Madison's number. She answered on the second ring. "Garrett, I thought you were going home to play house with wifey. Why are you calling? It's risky." "Jess, Madison, listen to me." He caught himself. He had almost called her by the wrong name. "Something happened. Sarah knows. She knows everything. She filed for divorce. She kicked me out." Madison's voice shifted. Not fear, curiosity. "She found out about us?" "She knows everything. She's trying to freeze my accounts. She's being vindictive. I need a place to crash for a few days until my lawyers figure this out. I'm coming to your place." A long silence. "My place is really small, Garrett." "It's just for a night or two. I'll make it up to you. Once the divorce settles, I'll have my half of the assets. We're talking millions. We can go to Paris. We can get that loft in Tribeca you wanted." "Your half?" Madison's voice was sharp now. "I thought she had a prenup." "It's complicated. Look, I just need—" "Garrett," Madison cut him off. "I'm looking at my email right now. We just got a company-wide memo from HR." His stomach dropped. "You're at work?" "Yeah. Everyone's whispering. The memo says—" She paused, reading. "It says Garrett Bradford has been relieved of his duties as CEO effective immediately, due to gross misconduct and financial irregularities. It says we're not supposed to speak to you. It says security has your photo." "Madison, that's just corporate talk. They're trying to—" "It also says," she continued coldly, "that the company is conducting an internal audit of all expenses you approved. Did you put my apartment rent on the corporate card?" Garrett hesitated. I categorized it as a housing stipend for talent retention." "You idiot!" Madison screamed. "They're going to come after me. They're going to make me pay it back. I don't have that kind of money." "We'll fix it. I just need you to—" "You need what? You're broke, Garrett. You're fired. You're probably going to jail." "I have you. We love each other, remember? You said I was the only one who understood you." Madison laughed. It was a bitter, ugly sound. "I loved the lifestyle, Garrett. I loved the dinners and the gifts and the fact that you were going to make me a vice president. I didn't sign up to visit you in prison. I didn't sign up to be poor." "Madison, please. I have nobody else." "Don't come here. If you come here, I'm calling the cops. I have a career to think about." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. "Don't call me again." Click. Garrett stared at the phone. The screen went dark. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had traded a loyal wife for a mercenary. And the moment the money ran dry, the mercenary did exactly what mercenaries do. She saved herself. The train rattled on toward Manhattan. Garrett sat alone, surrounded by commuters reading newspapers and checking phones, living their normal lives. He had never felt more invisible. He spent the night at a motel in Queens. $43 got him a room that smelled of cigarette smoke and despair. He lay on the stained mattress, staring at the ceiling, and tried to think. Sarah had outmaneuvered him completely. She had known about the affairs for God knows how long. She had hired the best lawyers in the city. She had frozen his assets, taken his passport, bricked his car, and fired him from his own company. But there was one thing she hadn't counted on. Garrett knew where the bodies were buried. He had set up the offshore accounts. He had created the shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He had designed the entire tax structure that kept Bradford Sterling profitable. If Sarah wanted to play dirty, he could play dirtier. He would go to the IRS. He would go to the New York Times. He would expose everything. The tax avoidance, the hidden accounts, all of it. Yes, he might implicate himself, but he was going down anyway. Why not take her with him? "You want a war, Sarah?" Garrett whispered to the empty room. "Fine. Let's see how you like it when the whole world knows what your precious company really does." He found a 24-hour internet cafe and paid for an hour of computer time. He began to type. The fluorescent lights of the internet cafe hummed above Garrett's head as his fingers hovered over the keyboard. His email to the IRS whistleblower office was almost complete. 3 pages of detailed accusations, account numbers, routing codes, shell company names, everything he had built over 10 years, laid bare in black and white. He read it one more time. To whom it may concern, I am writing to report widespread tax evasion and financial fraud at Bradford Sterling Medical Consulting. As the former CEO, I have direct knowledge of offshore accounts used to hide profits from the United States government. His finger touched the send button. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Garrett hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Mr. Bradford?" A woman's voice, professional, cold. "This is Agent Patricia Holloway with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Garrett's blood turned to ice. "We need to speak with you regarding Bradford Sterling Medical Consulting. Where are you currently located?" He hung up. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. The FBI. They were already involved. How? The divorce was filed less than 24 hours ago. Unless Sarah had been planning this for much longer than he realized. He looked at the email on the screen. If the FBI was already investigating, sending this would be suicide. He would be handing them a signed confession. But if he didn't send it, Sarah would control the narrative. She would paint him as the villain and herself as the innocent victim. He needed more information. He needed to know exactly what Sarah had told them. Garrett deleted the email and cleared the browser history. He paid for another hour of computer time and started searching. Bradford Sterling Medical Consulting News. Nothing yet. The story hadn't broken. Sarah Montgomery Whitmore. A few old society pages, charity galas, hospital dedications, nothing connecting her to Bradford Sterling. Reynolds Stone Associates divorce. Horror stories. Husband after husband destroyed, assets seized, careers ruined, reputations obliterated. Garrett scrolled through the articles with growing dread. Every case followed the same pattern. The wife hired Reynolds Stone. The husband thought he could fight back. The husband lost everything. One article caught his eye. An interview with Arthur Reynolds himself. "People ask me how we win every case," Reynolds had said. "The answer is simple. We don't take cases we can't win. By the time we file, the war is already over. We're just collecting the surrender." Garrett slammed the laptop shut. Sarah had hired the best. She had planned for every contingency. She had frozen his assets before he even knew there was a fight. He was already defeated. He just hadn't accepted it yet. But Garrett Bradford had never accepted defeat in his life. He pulled out his burner phone and scrolled through his contacts. There had to be someone who could help. Someone who owed him a favor. Someone who wasn't afraid of the Whitmore name. His finger stopped on a name he hadn't thought about in years. Victor Crane. Victor was a fixer. A man who solved problems that couldn't be solved through legal channels. Garrett had used him once, years ago, to make a sexual harassment complaint disappear. It had cost $50,000 and a guilty conscience, but the problem had vanished. If anyone could find dirt on Sarah, it was Victor. Garrett dialed the number. "Who is this?" Victor's voice was raspy, suspicious. "Victor, it's Garrett Bradford." A long pause. "Bradford, I heard you had some trouble."
You heard already? Word travels fast when a Whitmore is involved. What do you want?
"I need information. On my wife. On Sarah." Victor laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You want me to dig up dirt on a Whitmore? You know what happens to people who go after that family." "I'll pay whatever you want." "With what? Your accounts are frozen, Bradford. Your cards are canceled. You couldn't pay for a cup of coffee right now. When this is over, you'll be in prison or bankrupt. Probably both." Victor's voice hardened. "I'm going to give you some free advice, Bradford. The only free advice I've ever given anyone. Walk away. Take whatever scraps she offers you and disappear. The Whitmores don't lose. They don't forgive. And they don't forget." "I can't just..." "You can. And you will. Because the alternative is much, much worse." Victor hung up. Garrett stared at the phone. Even the fixer was afraid of Sarah's family. Who the hell had he married? He left the internet cafe and wandered the streets of Queens. The morning rush was beginning. People hurried past him, clutching coffee cups and briefcases, living their ordinary lives. 24 hours ago, Garrett had been one of them. 24 hours ago, he had been a CEO, a millionaire, a man who mattered. Now, he was nothing. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the night before, when he and Madison had ordered room service at the St. Regis. Champagne and oysters. He had signed the check without looking at the total. He found a bodega and bought a breakfast sandwich with his last few dollars. He ate it standing on the sidewalk, watching the city wake up. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He answered it. "What?" "Garrett?" A familiar voice, hesitant. "It's James." James Sterling, his business partner, his former best friend. "James, thank God. Listen, I need your help. Sarah has gone completely..." "Garrett, stop." "I'm not calling to help you." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Then why are you calling?" "To warn you. The board met again this morning. Sarah's lawyers presented evidence of your embezzlement. They have everything, Garrett. Every fake expense report. Every shell payment. Every dollar you stole." "I didn't steal anything. I was the CEO. I had discretionary spending authority." "You expensed your mistress's apartment as talent retention. You bought her jewelry and called it vendor gifts. You took her to Cabo and filed it as a client retreat." James's voice cracked. $342,000, Garrett. That's what they're saying you took. "That's ridiculous. I built that company." "You built it with Sarah's money. Did you forget that? Every dollar we made, every contract we signed, it all traces back to her initial investment. You weren't building a company, Garrett. You were spending her money and calling it yours." Garrett had no response. The truth of James's words hit him like a physical blow. The board has voted to pursue criminal charges, James continued. They're cooperating fully with the FBI. Sarah wanted me to tell you personally. She wanted you to tell me? Why? Because she wanted you to know that this could have gone differently. If you had just been honest with her, if you had just asked for a divorce like a normal person, she would have let you walk away with something. But you had to lie. You had to steal. You had to treat her like she was nothing. James paused. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. She loved you, Garrett. She really loved you. And you threw it away for a 26-year-old marketing coordinator who dumped you the second you went broke. James, please. We've been friends for 20 years. We were friends. Past tense. I can't be associated with you anymore. None of us can. So that's it? Everyone's just abandoning me? You abandoned yourself, Garrett, a long time ago. You just didn't notice. James hung up. Garrett threw the phone against the wall of the bodega. It shattered into pieces. 2 phones in 2 days. He was running out of ways to contact the outside world. He slumped against the wall and buried his face in his hands. This couldn't be happening. He was Garrett Bradford. He had graduated top of his class at Wharton. He had built a consulting empire from nothing. He had been profiled in Forbes, for God's sake. And now he was sitting on a sidewalk in Queens, eating a $3 breakfast sandwich with exactly $0 to his name. His mind raced through his options. He could turn himself in, cooperate with the FBI. Maybe they would go easy on him if he testified against whom? Against himself? He was the one who had set up the offshore accounts. He was the one who had embezzled the money. There was no one above him to flip on. He could run, but his passport was gone. His credit cards were canceled. He couldn't even buy a bus ticket to New Jersey. He could beg, go back to Greenwich, get on his knees in front of Sarah and plead for mercy. The thought made him physically ill. But what choice did he have? Garrett Bradford had spent his entire life believing he was special, smarter than everyone else, more deserving, more important. He had walked through the world like he owned it, and everyone had let him. Now the world was walking past him without a second glance. He stood up. He wiped the crumbs from his ruined suit. He started walking toward the train station. If Sarah wanted to see him grovel, he would grovel. He would apologize. He would cry. He would do whatever it took to survive. He still had one card left to play. He knew Sarah. He had been married to her for 10 years. He knew that beneath the cold exterior, she was soft, sentimental. She still had a box of love letters he had written her when they were dating. She still celebrated the anniversary of their first kiss. If he could get to her alone, away from the lawyers and the FBI agents, he could reach that part of her. He could remind her of what they had been. He could make her remember why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. The train to Greenwich took 45 minutes. Garrett spent the entire ride planning what he would say. He would start with an apology. He would admit everything. He would take full responsibility for the affairs, for the lies, for the stealing. Then he would pivot. He would talk about the good times, the trip to Italy for their 5th anniversary, the night they danced in the rain outside that little restaurant in Positano, the way she used to laugh at his terrible jokes. He would cry. He had always been able to cry on command. It was a useful skill in negotiations. And if that didn't work, he would threaten. He knew things about the Whitmore family, things that weren't in any public record, old scandals, buried secrets. Catherine Whitmore, Sarah's grandmother, had built her hospital empire on the backs of some very questionable deals. If Sarah pushed him too far, he would drag the whole family into the mud. It wasn't noble. It wasn't right. But Garrett Bradford had stopped caring about noble and right a long time ago. The train pulled into Greenwich Station. Garrett walked the familiar streets toward Blackwood Lane. His feet hurt. His suit was wrinkled and stained. He looked like a homeless man wandering through one of the richest neighborhoods in America. He reached the house. His house. Sarah's house now. There were 2 black SUVs in the driveway. A police cruiser was parked on the street. Garrett's heart stopped. They were waiting for him. He ducked behind a large oak tree on the neighbor's lawn and watched. The front door opened. A man in a gray suit stepped out.
Arthur Reynolds, the shark lawyer. He was talking on his phone, gesturing emphatically. Behind him came 2 uniformed police officers. And then, from the doorway, Sarah emerged. Garrett's breath caught in his throat. She looked different. She wasn't wearing the floral cardigans or the sensible slacks he was used to. She was wearing a black power suit that fit her like armor. Her hair was cut in a sharp, sophisticated bob. She stood taller. She looked powerful. She looked like a CEO. She was talking to one of the officers, gesturing toward the house. She seemed completely calm, completely in control. This was not the woman Garrett had married. This was not the quiet librarian who made him soup when he had a cold. This was a Whitmore, a predator in sheep's clothing. He had never stood a chance. Sarah turned and looked directly at the oak tree where Garrett was hiding. She couldn't possibly see him from that distance. It was just a coincidence. But she smiled. A small, cold smile that made Garrett's blood freeze. Then she turned and walked back into the house. Garrett's legs were trembling. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But where? He had nowhere to go. No money, no friends, no options. He stepped out from behind the tree and started walking toward the driveway. One of the officers spotted him immediately. "Hold it right there!" Garrett raised his hands. "I just want to talk to my wife." Arthur Reynolds ended his call and turned to face him. His expression was somewhere between amusement and pity. "Mr. Bradford, we've been expecting you." "I want to see Sarah." "Mrs. Montgomery has no interest in speaking with you. However, these officers have a few questions they'd like to ask." The police officers approached him. One had his hand on his holster. "Garrett Bradford?" the taller one said. "Yes. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Cold. Tight. "Sarah!" Garrett screamed toward the house. "Sarah, please! I'm sorry! I'm sorry for everything! Just talk to me!" The front door remained closed. "Sarah, I know you can hear me! Don't do this! We can work this out!" Nothing. The officers began leading him toward the cruiser. Garrett twisted, trying to look back at the house. "I'll tell them everything, Sarah! I'll tell them about your grandmother! I'll tell them about the hospitals! You think you're clean? You think your family is clean?" Arthur Reynolds stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried perfectly. "Mr. Bradford, I would advise you to stop talking. Every word you say is being recorded. And as for the Whitmore family," he smiled, "we've been dealing with threats like yours for 100 years. You have nothing that can hurt them. You never did." They pushed Garrett into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut. Through the window, Garrett saw Sarah step out onto the porch. She was holding a cup of coffee. She watched the police cruiser pull away with the same expression she might have used to watch a garbage truck. Mild interest. Nothing more. As the cruiser turned onto the main road, Garrett caught one last glimpse of the house. His house. The house he had filled with stolen furniture and empty promises. Sarah raised her coffee cup in a small, mocking toast. Then she turned and walked inside, closing the door behind her. Garrett Bradford sat in the back of the police cruiser, watching his entire life disappear in the rearview mirror. He had thought he was the smartest person in every room. He had thought he could outsmart anyone, including his own wife. He was wrong. The cruiser merged onto the highway, heading toward the federal courthouse in Manhattan. Garrett stared out the window at the gray Connecticut sky and wondered how everything had gone so wrong, so fast. But deep down, he knew the answer. Everything hadn't gone wrong fast. It had been going wrong for years. He had just been too arrogant to notice. The woman he had dismissed as simple and boring had been watching him the entire time. Learning. Planning. Waiting. And when she finally made her move, it was perfect. Garrett Bradford had spent his whole life playing chess, but he had never realized he was playing against a grand master. And now the game was over. The holding cell smelled of sweat and despair. Garrett sat on a metal bench, his wrists raw from the handcuffs, his mind racing through every possible escape route. There were none. A guard appeared at the bars. "Bradford, your lawyer's here." Garrett looked up. "I didn't call a lawyer." "Well, someone did. Move." They led him to a small interview room. Sitting at the table was a man Garrett had never seen before. Mid-50s, expensive suit, silver hair slicked back. "Mr. Bradford, I'm Daniel Ashworth. I've been retained to represent you." Garrett sat down slowly. "Retained by whom?" Ashworth smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Your wife." Garrett's blood ran cold. "Sarah hired you? Why would she—" "Mrs. Montgomery believes that everyone deserves competent legal representation, even those who have wronged her." Ashworth opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "She also wanted me to deliver a message." "What message?" Ashworth slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Handwritten, Sarah's elegant cursive. Garrett picked it up with trembling fingers. "Garrett, I'm not a monster. I never wanted to destroy you. I just wanted the truth. You could have told me about the affairs. We could have divorced quietly, split our assets fairly, and moved on with our lives. But you chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to treat our marriage like a game you were winning. You weren't winning. You were losing everything that mattered, one lie at a time. Mr. Ashworth will explain your options. I suggest you listen carefully. This is the last kindness I will show you." Sarah Garrett read the letter 3 times. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely hold the paper. "What options?" he asked. Ashworth leaned back in his chair. "The prosecution has offered a plea deal. You plead guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of embezzlement. You serve 5 years in a federal minimum security facility. You forfeit all claims to marital assets. In exchange, they drop the conspiracy charges and recommend a reduced sentence." 5 years? "It's a good deal, Mr. Bradford. The evidence against you is overwhelming. If this goes to trial, you're looking at 15 to 20. Garrett stared at the wall. 5 years. 5 years of his life, gone. He would be 47 when he got out. No money, no career, no reputation. "What's my other option?" "You fight it. You go to trial. You lose." Ashworth shrugged. "I've reviewed the discovery materials. Your wife has been building this case for 2 years. She has bank records, email trails, witness testimony. She even has recordings. Recordings? Of what? Ashworth pulled out a small digital recorder and pressed play. Garrett's own voice filled the room. Elena is safe. She's the anchor. You don't worry about the anchor. You just let it drag along the bottom while you steer the ship. Madison's laugh. You're terrible. I'm practical. Sarah gives me stability. You give me excitement. Why choose when I can have both? The recording clicked off. Garrett felt sick. How did she get that? Your mistress's apartment was bugged. The apartment you were paying for through company funds. Ashworth almost smiled. Your wife is very thorough. Madison knew? No, Madison was just as surprised as you are. In fact, she's already agreed to testify against you in exchange for immunity. The betrayal hit Garrett like a physical blow. Madison, the woman he had risked everything for, the woman who had sworn she loved him. She was going to put him in prison. When did Sarah start planning this? Garrett asked quietly. Ashworth checked his notes. Based on what I've seen, approximately 26 months ago, shortly after you began your affair with Ms. Cole. 26 months. Sarah had known almost from the beginning. For 26 months, she had cooked his meals, cleaned his house, smiled at his lies, all while building a case that would destroy him. Why didn't she just leave? Garrett whispered. If she knew, why didn't she just divorce me then? Ashworth looked at him with something that might have been pity. You'll have to ask her that, Mr. Bradford, but if I had to guess, I would say she was waiting.
Waiting for what? For you to give her enough rope to hang yourself. Ashworth stood up. The plea deal expires in 48 hours. I suggest you take it. He walked out, leaving Garrett alone with the weight of his own destruction. The federal detention center was cold. Garrett had been transferred there after his arraignment, bail denied due to flight risk. He was given an orange jumpsuit, a number, and a cell the size of his walk-in closet at home. His former home. The first night, he didn't sleep. He lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 10 years. Every lie he had told. Every corner he had cut. Every time he had looked at Sarah and seen nothing but a convenient accessory to his successful life. He had been so sure she didn't know, so confident in his own cleverness. But Sarah had always been smarter than him. He just hadn't bothered to notice. On the second day, he had a visitor. The guard led him to the visitation room. Behind the glass partition sat his mother. Eleanor Bradford was 72 years old. She had raised Garrett alone after his father left when he was 6. She had worked 2 jobs to send him to good schools. She had sacrificed everything for his success. And now she was sitting in a prison visitation room, looking at her son in an orange jumpsuit. "Mom," Garrett's voice cracked. Eleanor didn't speak for a long moment. Her eyes were red, but her face was hard. "I got a call from a reporter yesterday," she finally said. "He wanted to know how I felt about my son being arrested for fraud. He asked if I had any comment on the affair." "Mom, I can explain. Can you?" Her voice was ice. "Can you explain why you threw away everything? Your career? Your marriage? Your freedom?" "Sarah is exaggerating. She's making it sound worse than—" "I spoke to Sarah." Garrett froze. "What?" "She called me 2 days ago, before you were arrested." Eleanor's hands were trembling. "She told me everything, Garrett. Everything you did. Everything you stole. She showed me the pictures of you and that girl." "Mom." "She apologized to me." Eleanor's voice broke. "Your wife, the woman you betrayed, called to apologize that I would have to see my son's name in the papers. She apologized for the embarrassment it would cause me. Garrett had no words. "What kind of man did I raise?" Eleanor whispered. "I worked myself to the bone to give you every opportunity. I taught you to be honest. I taught you to be faithful. And this is what you became?" "I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. The guard looked over, but didn't intervene. "You stole from your own company. You cheated on your wife for 2 years. You lied to everyone who trusted you. Those aren't mistakes, Garrett. Those are choices." I know I messed up. But I can fix it if you could just what? Bail you out? I already tried." They denied bail. And even if they hadn't, I don't have that kind of money. Eleanor laughed bitterly. "I'm retired, Garrett. I live on Social Security. You never once offered to help me, you know. Not once. You were making millions, and your mother was clipping coupons." The guilt hit Garrett like a wave. She was right. He had been so focused on impressing strangers that he had forgotten about the one person who had always been there for him. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know you are. You're sorry now, when you're sitting in a cell with no way out." Eleanor stood up. "Take the plea deal, Garrett. Do your time. And when you get out, try to become someone worth knowing." She walked away without looking back. Garrett sat in the visitation room for a long time after she left. The guard had to come get him twice before he finally stood up. His mother was ashamed of him. His wife had destroyed him. His mistress had betrayed him. His business partner had abandoned him. He was completely alone. That night, lying in his cell, Garrett made a decision. He would take the plea deal. He would plead guilty. He would serve his time. But he would not give Sarah the satisfaction of seeing him broken. He would survive this. He would rebuild. And someday, somehow, he would make her regret what she had done to him. It was a hollow promise, made in the darkness of a prison cell. But it was all he had left. The plea hearing took place 3 weeks later. Garrett stood before Judge Margaret Chen in the Southern District Federal Court, wearing a suit his mother had brought him. It didn't fit right anymore. He had lost 15 pounds. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. James Sterling sat in the back row, his face unreadable. A few former colleagues were there, watching the downfall of a man they had once envied. And in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table, sat Sarah. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and pearl earrings. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked exactly like the woman Garrett had married 10 years ago. Except for her eyes. Her eyes were different now. Harder. Older. Judge Chen read the charges. Wire fraud, embezzlement, misappropriation of corporate funds. Each count felt like a nail in Garrett's coffin. "Mr. Bradford, how do you plead?" Garrett looked at Sarah. She met his gaze without flinching. He thought about all the things he wanted to say, all the excuses, all the justifications, all the ways he could try to shift the blame. But looking into Sarah's eyes, he realized something he should have understood years ago. She wasn't his enemy. She had never been his enemy. He was his own enemy. He had always been his own worst enemy. "Guilty, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sarah's expression didn't change. Judge Chen nodded. "Very well. Based on the plea agreement, I am sentencing you to 5 years in federal custody, to be served at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut. You will also pay restitution in the amount of $342,000 to Bradford Sterling Medical Consulting. $342,000, the exact amount he had stolen to fund his affair with Madison. Do you have anything you wish to say before sentencing is finalized?" Garrett turned to face the courtroom. His eyes found Sarah again.
"I'm sorry," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for the stealing. I'm sorry for treating my marriage like it didn't matter." He paused. The courtroom was silent. "I thought I was smarter than everyone else. I thought I deserved more than I had. I thought I could have everything without consequences." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong, and I'm going to spend the next 5 years paying for it." He looked directly at Sarah. "I know you probably don't believe me. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I lost. And it wasn't the money or the house or the company." His voice cracked. "It was you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid to see it." Sarah's expression flickered. For just a moment, Garrett saw something in her eyes. Pain? Regret? He couldn't tell. Then her face hardened again, and she looked away. Judge Chen cleared her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford. The court accepts your plea. You will be remanded to custody immediately. This hearing is adjourned." The bailiffs approached. Garrett held out his hands for the cuffs. As they led him toward the side door, he passed within 3 feet of Sarah. She didn't look at him. "Sarah," he said quietly. She still didn't turn. "I hope you find someone who deserves you." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Sarah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I already did, Garrett. I always deserved myself. I just forgot that for a while." The bailiffs pulled him away. The door closed behind him. Garrett Bradford walked out of the courtroom and into the next 5 years of his life. The prison transport van rumbled along the highway toward Danbury. Garrett sat in the back, shackled to a metal bench, surrounded by other men in orange jumpsuits. Nobody spoke. Through the small window, Garrett watched the Connecticut countryside roll by. Tree-lined streets, white picket fences. The same world he had once ruled, now passing by like a movie he wasn't part of anymore. His mind drifted to Sarah's last words. "I always deserved myself. I just forgot that for a while." He had never understood her, not really. He had looked at her and seen what he wanted to see. A quiet woman, a simple woman, a woman who existed to make his life easier. But Sarah had never been simple. She had been patient. She had been watching. She had been waiting for him to become the man she thought she had married. And when she finally realized he never would, she had done what any self-respecting person would do. She had walked away. The van pulled through the gates of the correctional facility. Garrett looked up at the razor wire and the guard towers. This was his home now. For the next 5 years, this was all he would know. The doors opened. The guards ushered them out. Garrett Bradford, former CEO, former millionaire, former master of the universe, stepped into the processing center and began his new life. He had lost everything: his money, his career, his wife, his freedom. But as he walked through the metal detectors and submitted to the strip search and put on his prison-issued uniform, he realized something. He hadn't lost everything. He had lost everything that didn't matter. The money had been Sarah's anyway. The career had been built on lies. The wife had been a stranger he never bothered to know. What he had lost was the illusion. The story he had told himself about who he was and what he deserved. Now, standing in the intake room of a federal prison, Garrett Bradford finally saw himself clearly. And he didn't like what he saw. But for the first time in his life, he was ready to change. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be fast. And there was no guarantee that the person he became would be any better than the person he had been. But he had 5 years to figure it out. 5 years to become someone his mother wouldn't be ashamed of.
5 years to become someone who could look in the mirror without flinching. The guard handed him a bedroll and pointed down the hall. "Cell block D, second floor, bunk 14. Garrett nodded and started walking. Behind him, the heavy steel door slammed shut, with a sound that echoed through the corridor. It was the sound of an ending.
And maybe, just maybe, the sound of a beginning. 3 years into his sentence, Garrett Bradford had become someone he no longer recognized. His hair was more gray than brown now. His hands, once soft from years of pushing papers and shaking hands at country clubs, were calloused from working in the prison laundry. He had lost 30 pounds. His designer suits had been replaced by khaki uniforms that smelled of industrial detergent. But the biggest change was invisible. He had stopped lying. Not because he had become a saint, not because prison had magically reformed him, but because lying required energy, and Garrett had none left to spare. The elaborate stories, the careful manipulations, the constant performance of being someone he wasn't. It was exhausting. And in prison, there was no audience to perform for. So he stopped. He woke up at 6. He worked his shift in the laundry. He ate his meals in silence. He read books from the prison library, biographies mostly, of men who had risen and fallen, and sometimes risen again. And every night, before he fell asleep, he thought about Sarah. Not with anger anymore, not with resentment, just with a heavy, aching sadness that never quite went away. He had written her 7 letters in the first year. She had never replied. Eventually, he stopped writing. Some wounds were too deep to heal with words. The prison library had become Garrett's sanctuary. It was quiet there. The other inmates mostly left him alone. He wasn't important enough to bully, wasn't connected enough to befriend. He was shelving books one afternoon when a young man approached him. 22, maybe 23. Thin face, nervous eyes. "You're Bradford, right? The CEO guy?" Garrett didn't look up from his cart. "Former CEO. What do you want?" "I'm Marcus Webb." The kid shifted from foot to foot. "I got 18 months for securities fraud. First offense. I was working at this hedge fund, and my boss told me to." "I don't care." Marcus blinked. "What?" "I don't care why you're here. Everyone in this place has a story about how it wasn't really their fault. How they were following orders. How they got caught up in something bigger than them." Garrett finally looked at the kid. "It's all garbage. You're here because you made a choice. Own it." Marcus's face flushed. "That's harsh, man." "It's the truth. You want harsh? Wait until you get out and try to get a job with a felony on your record. Wait until your friends stop returning your calls. Wait until you realize that everyone who said they cared about you only cared about what you could do for them." "Is that what happened to you?" Garrett laughed. It was a hollow sound. "Kid, I lost everything. My company, my house, my wife. My mother won't even visit me anymore." "Damn." Marcus sat down on a nearby chair, uninvited. "What did you do?" "I cheated on my wife. I stole money to pay for my mistress. I lied to everyone who trusted me." Garrett shelved another book. "And the worst part? I thought I was smart. I thought I was getting away with it." "Were you? Getting away with it?" "For 2 years. I thought I was playing everyone. Turns out, my wife knew the whole time. She was building a case against me while I was building a fantasy." Marcus whistled low. "Cold." "No. Fair." Garrett turned to face the kid fully. "I deserved everything that happened to me. The only person who didn't deserve any of it was her. She trusted me, and I threw that trust away for a 26-year-old who dropped me the second I went broke." "The mistress?" "Madison Cole. Last I heard, she's engaged to some tech millionaire in San Francisco. Landed on her feet." Garrett's jaw tightened. Meanwhile,
I'm folding towels for 30 cents an hour. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Do you ever think about revenge? Like, when you get out? I used to. First year, that's all I thought about. How I was going to expose my wife's family. How I was going to bring down everyone who abandoned me. Garrett shook his head. But then I realized something. What? There was nothing to expose. My wife didn't do anything wrong. Her family didn't do anything wrong. The only person who did anything wrong was me. All those revenge fantasies? They were just another lie I was telling myself. Marcus leaned forward. So what do you think about now? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. I think about the man I could have been. If I hadn't been so greedy, if I hadn't been so arrogant, if I had just appreciated what I had. And who was that man? I don't know. That's the thing. I spent so much time pretending to be someone else that I never figured out who I actually was. Garrett picked up another book. Maybe that's what these next 2 years are for. Figuring it out. Marcus stood up. That's deep, man. It's obvious. It just took me 45 years and a prison sentence to see it. The kid left. Garrett went back to shelving books. But something had shifted. Talking about it out loud, admitting everything to a stranger. It felt different than just thinking about it in his cell. It felt like the first step towards something he couldn't name yet. 6 months later, Garrett had an unexpected visitor. He walked into the visitation room expecting his mother. She had started coming again a few months ago, tentatively, still angry, but willing to try. But the woman sitting behind the glass wasn't Eleanor Bradford. It was Sarah. Garrett stopped dead in his tracks. His heart slammed against his ribs. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. She looked different. Not physically, she was still beautiful, still elegant, still carrying herself with that quiet grace that had first attracted him all those years ago. But there was something softer in her face now. The hardness he had seen at the courthouse was gone. Or maybe it had just shifted into something else. He sat down slowly, picked up the phone. Sarah. Garrett. Her voice was the same, calm, measured, but there was a slight tremor underneath it that he had never heard before. Why are you here? Sarah took a breath. I've been asking myself that question for 3 hours. I drove up here twice before and turned around both times. What changed? I don't know. Maybe I needed to see you, to see if you were really... She paused. To see if you were different. Garrett looked down at his khaki uniform, at his calloused hands, at the man he had become. I'm different, he said quietly. But I don't know if I'm better. What does that mean? It means I'm not lying to myself anymore. But I'm not sure I know who I am without the lies. Sarah studied him through the glass. Her eyes were searching, probing, looking for something he wasn't sure he could give her. You've lost weight, she said finally. 32 pounds. Prison food and manual labor. You look healthier, less polished. Less fake, you mean? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Maybe. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of fluorescent lights, the murmur of other conversations around them. I read your letters, Sarah said suddenly. Garrett's head snapped up. What? The 7 letters you sent me. I read them all. I couldn't respond. I wasn't ready. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand what you put me through? Her voice cracked. I loved you, Garrett. I loved you so much that I ignored every red flag, every late night, every business trip that didn't add up. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Sarah. And then I found the receipt. 3 years ago. The hotel in Miami.
the room service for two, the spa treatments. Her eyes glistened. I knew then. I knew, and I didn't want to believe it.
So I hired a private investigator, hoping he would prove me wrong. He didn't. No, he proved me right. And for the next 2 years, I watched you lie to my face every single day. I watched you kiss me goodbye and drive to her apartment. I watched you buy her jewelry with money from our company. My company. Why didn't you just leave? Garrett asked. The question had haunted him for years. Sarah wiped her eyes. Because I wanted to understand. I wanted to know if it was something I had done. If I had pushed you away. If I could have been different. It wasn't you. It was never you. I know that now. But back then, I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. What I could have given you that I didn't. She laughed bitterly. It took me 2 years and the very expensive therapist to realize the answer. What was it? Nothing. There was nothing I could have given you that would have been enough. Because you didn't want a partner. You wanted an audience. You wanted someone to applaud while you performed the role of the successful man. The words hit Garrett like a punch to the gut, because they were true. Every syllable. I know, he said. I know that now. Do you? Really? Yes, I've had 3 years to think about nothing else. And you're right. I treated you like a prop. I treated our marriage like a stage. And when I got bored with the performance, I found another stage with a younger audience. Sarah was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. I wish you had just told me, she whispered. I wish you had just said you were unhappy. I would have let you go. We could have ended it like adults. I didn't want to end it. I wanted to have both. I wanted the stability of being married to you, and the excitement of being with her. Garrett's voice broke. I was a coward and a fool. Yes, you were. They sat in silence again. The weight of 3 years of pain and regret pressing down on both of them. Why are you really here, Sarah? Garrett finally asked. She took a long time to answer. Because I'm getting married. The words hit Garrett like a bullet. He felt his heart stop, restart, stop again. Married? His name is David Chen. He's a pediatric surgeon at the hospital. Sarah smiled through her tears. He's kind. He's honest. He's everything you weren't. Garrett swallowed hard. I'm happy for you. Are you? No, I'm devastated. But I'm also relieved. You deserve to be happy, Sarah. You always did. I know I do. It took me a long time to believe that, but I do now. Then why tell me? Why come all the way here to tell me you're getting married? Sarah wiped her eyes again. Because I needed closure, and I think you did too. Closure? I spent 3 years hating you, Garrett. 3 years wishing I had never met you. 3 years wondering if I would ever be able to trust anyone again. She leaned forward. But I don't hate you anymore. I'm not sure when it stopped, but it did. And I didn't want to marry David while I was still carrying that anger. So this is what? Forgiveness? I don't know if I can forgive you. Not completely. Not yet. Sarah pressed her hand against the glass. But I can let go. I can move forward. And I wanted you to know that. Garrett looked at her hand on the glass. He raised his own hand and pressed it against hers, the cold barrier between them. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For coming. For telling me. For... His voice caught. For being kind to me when you had every reason not to be. Sarah smiled. It was a sad smile, but a real one. Goodbye, Garrett. Goodbye, Sarah. She hung up the phone. She stood up. She walked toward the door, and then she stopped, turned around, picked up the phone one more time. Garrett grabbed his phone instantly. "I almost forgot," Sarah said. "Your mother is sick." Garrett's blood went cold.
What? She didn't want me to tell you, but I thought you should know. She was diagnosed with cancer 6 months ago. Stage 3.
Why didn't anyone tell me? She asked us not to. She said she didn't want you to worry while you were in here. Garrett's hands were shaking. Is she going to be okay? They don't know yet. She's doing chemotherapy. The doctors are optimistic, but... Sarah's voice softened. You should call her, Garrett. Whatever happened between you, she's still your mother. I will. I'll call her tonight. Sarah nodded. Take care of yourself, Garrett. This time, she didn't look back. Garrett sat in the visitation room long after she left. The guard had to come get him twice. His mother was dying. Sarah was getting married. And he was sitting in a prison, helpless to do anything about either. He had spent his whole life trying to control everything. His career, his marriage, his image. And now he controlled nothing.
But somehow, in that moment of complete powerlessness, Garrett felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not contentment, just a quiet acceptance of the truth. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't undo the damage he had done. He couldn't be there for his mother the way he should have been. But he could change what happened next. He could call his mother and tell her he loved her. He could be honest. He could stop pretending. He could become, finally, the man he should have been all along. The guard approached. Time's up, Bradford. Garrett stood up. I need to make a phone call. Phone hours are at 7. Please, it's my mother. She's sick. The guard studied him for a moment. Something in Garrett's face must have convinced him. 5 minutes, that's all I can give you. Thank you. They walked to the phone bank. Garrett dialed his mother's number with trembling fingers. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Mom, it's me. A long pause. Garrett. Her voice was weaker than he remembered. Is everything okay? Sarah told me, Mom, about the cancer. Another pause. He heard her sigh. I told her not to. I know, but I'm glad she did. Garrett gripped the phone tighter. Why didn't you tell me? Because you have enough to deal with. You don't need to worry about me. Mom, you're my mother. Of course I need to worry about you. You didn't worry about me for 40 years. Why start now? The words cut deep, because they were true. I know, Garrett said. I know I was a terrible son. I was so focused on my own life that I forgot about the person who gave me that life. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Eleanor was crying. He could hear it through the phone. I didn't raise you to be like this, she whispered. I know. You raised me to be honest, to be faithful, to be good, and I failed at all of it. Why, Garrett? Why did you throw everything away? Because I was scared. Because I thought success would make me happy. Because I was chasing something that didn't exist. He paused. But I'm not chasing anymore, Mom. I'm just trying to be better, one day at a time. Do you mean that? Yes, I mean it. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I have a treatment next Tuesday, she finally said. The doctors say it's going well. They think they caught it early enough. That's good. That's really good. I'm going to beat this, Garrett. I'm not done yet. Despite everything, Garrett smiled. I know you will, Mom. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Time's up, Bradford, the guard said behind him. I have to go, Mom.
But I'll call you again. Every week. I promise. Okay. Her voice was stronger now. Okay, Garrett. I'd like that. I love you, Mom. A pause. Then, quietly, I love you too, son. Garrett hung up the phone. The guard led him back to his cell. That night, lying on his bunk, Garrett didn't think about revenge. He didn't think about what he had lost. He didn't think about the man he used to be. He thought about the man he was becoming. It wasn't much. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't the success story he had always imagined for himself. But it was honest. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. 5 years. 1,826 days. Garrett Bradford walked out of the Federal Correctional Institution on a Tuesday morning in October. The sky was gray. The air was cold. He was carrying a cardboard box containing everything he owned. 3 books, a toothbrush, and 73 letters from his mother. He was 47 years old. He had no money, no job, no home, and for the first time in his life, he was free. Not free in the legal sense. He had been free in that sense for years, living in minimum security with weekend furloughs and work release programs. This was something different. This was the freedom of a man who had finally stopped lying to himself. A bus idled at the curb. Garrett climbed aboard with his cardboard box and took a seat near the back. The other passengers didn't look at him. To them, he was just another middle-aged man on a Tuesday morning bus. They had no idea who he used to be. And honestly, neither did he. The bus dropped him off in downtown Stamford. He walked 3 blocks to a halfway house he had arranged through his parole officer. It was a converted Victorian, peeling paint and creaky stairs, but it was clean. It was safe. It was a start. His room was on the 3rd floor. Single bed, shared bathroom. A window that looked out onto a parking lot. Garrett set his cardboard box on the bed and sat down. He was home. The first week was the hardest. He had to check in with his parole officer every day. He had to attend mandatory counseling sessions. He had to find a job within 30 days or risk being sent back. The job search was humiliating. Garrett had a master's degree from Wharton. He had been the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. He had shaken hands with senators and dined with Fortune 500 executives. None of that mattered anymore. He applied to 47 jobs in the first 2 weeks. Office positions, administrative roles, anything that used his skills. He got 3 callbacks. All 3 ended the same way. We appreciate your qualifications, Mr. Bradford, but we're not able to move forward at this time. Translation: we don't hire felons. On day 22, Garrett walked into a small bookstore in downtown Stamford. He wasn't looking for a job. He was looking for something to read, something to distract him from the crushing weight of starting over. The owner was an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Her name was Margaret. She watched him browse for 20 minutes before approaching. "You look like a man who needs a purpose," she said. Garrett looked up. "Excuse me? I've been running this store for 30 years. I know that look. The look of someone who's lost and trying to pretend they're not." Garrett almost laughed. "That obvious? Only to someone who's been there." Margaret gestured around the store. "I lost my husband 10 years ago. Lost the will to keep going. This store saved me. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be. Loss teaches us things. It shows us what really matters." She studied him. "What's your name?" "Garrett. Garrett Bradford." Recognition flickered in her eyes. She had seen the news stories. She knew who he was. Garrett braced himself for the rejection. But Margaret just nodded slowly. The businessman. The one who went to prison. Yes. You served your time? 5 years. Got out last week. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Can you lift heavy boxes? What? I need someone to help with inventory, stocking shelves, moving shipments.
It's not glamorous, but it pays minimum wage, and I don't care about your past. Garrett stared at her. Why would you hire me? You know what I did. I know what the newspapers said you did. I also know that people are more than the worst thing they've ever done. Margaret handed him an application. Fill this out. Start Monday. Garrett took the paper with trembling hands. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet. The work is hard and the pay is terrible. But it's honest work, and sometimes that's all we need. Garrett started at the bookstore on Monday. He arrived an hour early and stayed 2 hours late. He stocked shelves. He organized inventory. He learned the names of regular customers. It was nothing like being a CEO. There were no board meetings, no power lunches, no corner office with a view. But for the first time in his life, Garrett felt useful. Not important, not powerful, just useful. Margaret became his mentor. She taught him about books, about customers, about the simple satisfaction of helping someone find the perfect story. You know what I've learned in 30 years of selling books? She asked him one evening. What? Everyone is running from something, and everyone is searching for something. The trick is figuring out what. Garrett shelved a copy of The Great Gatsby. What was I running from? Yourself, probably. Most successful people are. And what was I searching for? Margaret smiled. That's the question, isn't it? What were you searching for, Garrett? He didn't have an answer. Not yet. 6 months after his release, Garrett got a letter. It was from James Sterling, his former best friend, his former business partner, the man who had fired him and refused to speak to him for 5 years. Garrett almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Dear Garrett, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you if you burned this letter without reading it. But I needed to reach out. Something happened, and I think you deserve to know. Madison Cole was arrested last month. Securities fraud. Turns out she was running the same scam on her new fiancé that she ran on you. Skimming money, hiding assets, the whole thing. The difference is, this guy figured it out faster than you did. He pressed charges. She's looking at 3 to 5 years. I thought you'd want to know that karma came for her too. I also wanted to apologize. I abandoned you when you needed a friend. I chose the company over our friendship. I told myself it was the right thing to do, but the truth is, I was scared. Scared of being associated with your downfall. Scared of what people would think. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. You don't have to respond. You don't have to forgive me. But I wanted you to know that I think about what happened. I think about who we used to be, and I wonder if we could have done things differently. Take care of yourself, Garrett. James. Garrett read the letter 3 times. Madison was going to prison. The woman who had abandoned him the moment he went broke. The woman who had testified against him in exchange for immunity. He waited for the satisfaction to come. The vindication. The sweet taste of karma. It never arrived. All he felt was tired. He sat down at his small desk in his small room at the halfway house and wrote a reply. James, I got your letter. Thank you for reaching out. I won't pretend I wasn't angry. For a long time, you were at the top of my list of people who betrayed me. But I've had 5 years to think about betrayal, and I've realized something. I betrayed everyone first. I betrayed Sarah. I betrayed the company. I betrayed our friendship by putting you in an impossible position. You didn't abandon me, James. I abandoned myself. And you had no choice but to walk away from the wreckage. As for Madison, I don't feel satisfaction about what happened to her. I don't feel anything, really. She was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was my own arrogance, my own greed, my own inability to appreciate what I had. She didn't ruin my life. I ruined my life. She was just along for the ride. I'm working at a bookstore now. Minimum wage, stocking shelves. It's the most honest work I've ever done. I'm not the man I used to be. I'm not sure who I am yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. If you ever want to get coffee, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations. Just two old friends who've both made mistakes. Take care, James. Garrett. He mailed the letter the next morning. 3 weeks later, James walked into the bookstore. Garrett was in the back, unpacking a shipment of novels. He didn't see James until he heard the voice. So this is what rock bottom looks like. Garrett turned around. James was standing there in a tailored suit, looking exactly like Garrett used to look. Successful, polished, in control. James, I got your letter. James looked around the store. A bookstore, huh? Never would have guessed. Neither would I. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. 20 years of friendship. 5 years of separation. A lifetime of things left unsaid. I'm sorry, James finally said. For everything. I know. I got your letter. No, I mean, James ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry for who I became. After you left, I told myself I was doing the right thing, protecting the company, being responsible. But the truth is, I was just scared. Scared of what? Scared that what happened to you could happen to me. Scared that I was one bad decision away from losing everything. James laughed bitterly. So I buried myself in work. I cut off everyone who reminded me of who I used to be. I became exactly the kind of person I always swore I wouldn't become. What kind is that? Lonely. Rich and lonely. Garrett set down the box he was holding. I used to think rich and lonely was better than poor and lonely. Is it? No. Lonely is lonely. The money just gives you more expensive ways to distract yourself. James was quiet for a moment. Sarah's happy, he said finally. I saw her last month. Her and David. They have a baby now. A little girl. Garrett felt something twist in his chest. Not jealousy. Not regret. Just a deep, aching sadness for the life he had thrown away. Good, he said quietly. She deserves to be happy. You really mean that, don't you? I do. It took me a long time to get there, but I do. James shook his head. You've changed. Prison will do that to you. No, I mean really changed. The Garrett I knew would have been bitter, would have spent the rest of his life plotting revenge. The Garrett you knew was an idiot. Garrett smiled. I'm trying to be someone else now, someone better. It's slow going, but I'm making progress. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. The company is expanding. We're opening a new division focused on nonprofit consulting, helping hospitals and charities manage their finances. Good for you. I need someone to run it, someone who understands numbers, someone who's made mistakes and learned from them. James held out the card. The pay isn't what it used to be, and you'd have to work your way up from the bottom. But it's a chance. Garrett stared at the card. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. Why? After everything that happened, why would you take that risk? James smiled sadly.
Because I remember who you were before all this. Before the money and the ego and the lies. You were my best friend, Garrett. You were the smartest person I knew, and I believe that person is still in there somewhere. Garrett took the card. His hands were trembling. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. James turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. What? Your mother. She beat the cancer. I thought you'd want to know. She's in remission. The tears came before Garrett could stop them. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, James. James nodded and walked out of the store. Garrett stood there for a long time, holding the business card, letting the tears fall. His mother was healthy. His former friend had offered him a second chance. And somewhere out there, the woman he had loved and lost was building a beautiful life without him. It wasn't the ending Garrett had imagined for himself. It wasn't the triumphant comeback story. It wasn't revenge or vindication or justice. It was just life. Messy, complicated, imperfect life. And for the first time, Garrett was grateful for it. 1 year later, Garrett stood in front of a mirror in his small apartment, adjusting his tie. It wasn't an expensive tie. It wasn't from a designer boutique. He had bought it at a thrift store for $3. But it was clean, and it fit, and that was enough. Today was his first day at the Bradford Sterling Foundation. Not as CEO, not as an executive, as a junior consultant, working his way up from the bottom. James had been true to his word. The job wasn't glamorous. The pay was modest. But it was a chance to use his skills for something that mattered. He had spent the last year preparing, taking online courses in nonprofit management, volunteering at local charities, learning how to help instead of how to take. It wasn't easy. Nothing about starting over was easy. But Garrett had stopped expecting easy a long time ago. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Good luck today, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. Garrett smiled. He and his mother had rebuilt their relationship, slowly, carefully, one phone call at a time. She had forgiven him. Not completely, not yet. But enough. Enough to say she was proud. Enough to mean it. He grabbed his briefcase, a second-hand leather bag from the same thrift store, and headed out the door. The office was downtown, in a modest building that housed several nonprofits. Nothing like the glass tower where he used to work. No corner office. No executive parking. Just a cubicle and the computer, and a chance to do something good. James met him at the entrance. Ready? As I'll ever be. The team is excited to meet you. They've heard a lot about you. Garrett laughed. I bet they have. Not that stuff. I told them about the old you, the guy who used to tutor kids for free during college, the guy who donated half his first bonus to charity. James smiled. They know you made mistakes. They also know you paid for them. And they're okay with that? This is a foundation for second chances, Garrett. Everyone here believes in redemption. That's kind of the point. They walked into the building together. Garrett's new colleagues greeted him warmly. No judgment, no suspicion, just genuine welcome. He was assigned to a project helping small hospitals manage their finances more efficiently. The work was complex, challenging, exactly the kind of problem he used to love solving. But this time, there was no ego involved, no desperate need to prove himself. Just a quiet satisfaction in doing something that helped people. At the end of his first day, Garrett sat at his new desk and looked around the modest office. No view, no leather chairs, no awards on the wall. It was perfect. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. I heard you started at the foundation. I'm glad. You always were good with numbers. Use them for good this time. S. Sarah.
Garrett stared at the message for a long time. She didn't owe him anything. She didn't owe him kindness or encouragement or good wishes. But she had given them anyway. He typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally, he settled on something simple. Thank you. I will. He put the phone away and got back to work. 5 years in prison. 1 year rebuilding. A lifetime of mistakes. And finally, at 48 years old, Garrett Bradford was becoming the man he should have been all along. Not a CEO, not a millionaire, not a master of the universe. Just a man. Flawed and scarred, and trying every day to be a little bit better than the day before. It wasn't the life he had planned. It wasn't the life he had wanted. But it was the life he had earned. And that made all the difference. The story of Garrett Bradford didn't end with revenge. It didn't end with triumph. It didn't end with some dramatic confrontation where the villain got what he deserved. It ended with a man sitting at a desk, doing honest work, grateful for a second chance he didn't deserve. Because that's how most stories end. Not with explosions or revelations or perfect justice, but with people, broken and healing, doing the best they can with whatever time they have left. Sarah moved on. She built a beautiful life with a man who deserved her. She never forgot what Garrett had done, but she stopped letting it define her. James found his way back to friendship, one conversation at a time. He learned that loyalty meant more than success. Eleanor Bradford watched her son become someone she could finally be proud of. She died 3 years later, peacefully, in her sleep, knowing that her boy had found his way home. And Garrett? Garrett spent the rest of his life proving that change was possible. That the worst thing you've ever done doesn't have to be the last thing you're remembered for. He never got rich again. He never became famous again. He never had another corner office, or another trophy wife, or another shot at being the man who had everything. But he had something better. He had peace. And in the end, that was worth more than everything he had lost. Because the greatest punishment isn't prison. It isn't poverty. It isn't even irrelevance. The greatest punishment is living with who you used to be. And the greatest redemption is becoming someone new. Garrett Bradford learned that lesson the hard way. But he learned it. And that made all the difference. Some men cheat and never face consequences. Some men lie and get away with it forever. Some men treat the people who love them like garbage and die surrounded by wealth and admirers. But not this man. This man came home from cheating to find his life in ruins. This man lost everything he thought mattered and discovered what actually did. This man became, against all odds, a better person than he ever was before. And if there's one lesson in this story, it's this. The grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. Garrett Bradford spent his whole life chasing something that didn't exist, a fantasy of success that was always just out of reach. He threw away everything real for everything fake. And when the fake collapsed, all he had left was the truth. The truth about who he was. The truth about what he had done. The truth about what really mattered. It was a painful truth. A humiliating truth. A truth that took years to accept. But it was also a liberating truth. Because once you stop lying to yourself, you can finally start living. And that's exactly what Garrett Bradford did. He lived. Honestly. Imperfectly. Gratefully. Until the very end.